Hello everyone, today I am sharing with you some of my favorite thriller reads. So, I've read, I wouldn't say a lot of thrillers, but I started reading thrillers, I want to say like maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and since then I've read a lot. I guess that a lot depends on what your definition of a lot is. I'll tally it up and put the number right here of how many thriller books I've read. But I have, started out as a newbie. I don't think I'm a pro at any means with thrillers. I find myself somewhat in the middle, like maybe intermediate, maybe. So I've read quite a few, and there are some that I really love. So today I'm going to share with you some of my favorite thrillers and what they're about and why I like them. So yeah, let's get into it, because surprisingly there's a lot. Because somehow I'm very strict on thrillers. Why? I don't know. First up is one that I actually have recently read, and that is The One by John Mars. I got this and read this because everyone says it's their favorite John Mars books, and I never read a John Mars book before, but after reading this, you rest assured that I will be reading all of his works because I was addicted to this book. So I was really apprehensive about it because it's like 430 pages, and that is very lengthy to me for a thriller. I was like, I don't know how it's gonna keep me entertained and be thrilling for all those pages, but goodness me, I flew through this book in like 2 to 3 days, much like a lot of you guys said I was going to do. So the whole plot of The One is there's this company out there that has a DNA test where you can figure out your actual soulmate. Like, you give a blood sample, they do all of the like scientific things and stuff like that, and they tell you, hey, here's your soulmate. And basically we follow a wide array of people. I want to say like 5 to 7 people in this book, and you figure out what they do about this DNA test. You have different ones going on. There is a thrilling aspect to it because the book is, yes, classified as a thriller, but it's not the whole thing. It's almost, I don't know if I want to say soap opera-y, but it was just addicting to figure out what was going to happen to each of the characters, and the way he ended it, I really enjoyed it. There is a very thrilling aspect into it with maybe potentially a serial killer in it. But I really enjoyed it and found myself invested in all of the characters and was really reeling to figure out what was going to happen to each one. And this really dissects the decisions you make of if you could find out who your true love is, would you, take the test and things like that? And is it really, their soulmate? This company has made so many matches, but they've also broken up marriages. People have left their spouses over this stuff. And, it's the whole choice thing going on, but I really enjoyed it. Would highly recommend it. If you're like me and let the size kind of scare you, don't. Trust me, it's a long book, but you fly through it and you won't even believe how fast you flew through it. Next up is one of my old favorites, but still one of my favorites nonetheless, and that is You by Carolyn Kepnes. This book exploded on BookTube and everywhere else a few years ago when they made a book to show adaptation for it. I've actually reviewed both seasons of it. I'll leave them up here and down below, and I really love You, at least the first book. I don't want to talk about Hidden Bodies. Ugh. But You is a great book. And I know that Carolyn Kepnes is making a third one, so I don't know what more she could write about the story. Will I read it? Yes. But You, nevertheless, is about a character named Joe. And Joe is he works in New York, and he's a bookseller clerk. And basically one day he meets a girl named Beck at the bookstore, and he becomes enamored with her. He finds her on Facebook. He stalks her life, and he stalks her. Essentially, he finds a way to weave himself into her life, and he will do anything to be with her, killing anything at all. So this is really about a stalker. And what's great about You is I always say to listen to the audiobook to add on to the extra creep factor, because the book is called You, and he's like talking to you as if you were Beck. I'm watching you. You are doing this. And it's just really extra creepy. But Joe is such a very intriguing character that you find yourself liking him and then being like, no, this guy's actually insane. I love the book You, and I am a fan of the adaptation. Second season, not a ton, but the first season I did really enjoy. But yeah, I like it. I'll continue on with the show and series because what other stuff Joe gonna do? We're gonna have to find out together. Next up, I have My Lovely Wife by Samantha Downing. This is one of the few thrillers that I've given a 5 out of 5, which I've only given 3 thrillers, maybe 4, a 5 out of 5. So I don't know what that says about me, but this is pretty much about a couple that's married, their kids are grown up, they're still living at home and things like that, but they're just really kind of feeling the suburban life, and they're kind of over it. So they decide, hey, let's kill someone together for a new hobby, because that's normal. So they do that. They like scout out who they're gonna kill, and this things really escalate from there. It's full of twists and turns, and yes, I think a lot of those twists you can see coming, but the way she writes it was just so intriguing, and I was just left loving it, and the end page kind of leaves you on a cliffhanger, but maybe open-ended, and I loved every second of it. It was bananas. Like, it was crazy, but I loved it. Would highly recommend it. Likewise, with her sophomore novel, He Started It. I didn't like this one as much as My Lovely Wife, but the shock factor in this book at the end was just amazing. This is one of the few thriller books where I did not see the big plot twist coming whatsoever. I don't think anybody did. So this book is about a family that goes on a road trip together. We have a brother and two sisters, and their grandfather has died, and he decided to leave them a sum of money. But in order to get that sum of money, they have to recreate this road trip that they all took together when they were like really young. But a lot of really bad and creepy things happen on that road trip. So they're doing the road trip, and things get really interesting and creepy and scary, and you learn more. There's mysteries to uncover. Is your family hiding things from you? Are they really your family? All those kind of things. And if you like road trip books, check this out. If you like thriller books, check it out. If you like really big, shocking endings, check this one out. Like I said, I didn't like this one as much as My Lovely Wife, but I thought it was a really good follow-up to My Lovely Wife. The next couple books I want to talk about are actually labeled horror. I'm going to talk about them because I think they're light horror, and by that I mean I handled them, and I'm a pretty big scaredy cat. That's usually the one genre I don't touch with anything. It's horror, but there's been a few I've read that I think if I can handle it, you can handle it maybe, or whatever. There's still a mystery element to it, but it is labeled as horror. The first one being Mexican Gothic by Silvia Mora Garcia. I just finished this recently and really enjoyed it. So this book takes place in the 1950s in Mexico. We follow a character named Nemi, hopefully I pronounced that right, and she learns that her cousin is asking for help. Her cousin lives in this really old mansion with her new husband, and she's been writing really weird things, and so basically she goes there to the mansion to help out and to figure out what's really wrong with her cousin. When she gets there, she learns that number one, this place is hella creepy. Number two, the family that she's married into is just very odd. And the more she stays there, the more she uncovers the history of this family, what happened in their past, and even in this town, and why there's so many rules, like you can't talk during dinner, and you just can't do all of these things, and her cousin's being kind of locked away because she's sick, and you just really uncover it. This book does take a strange turn. At the end, I was like, what? But at the end of it, I was really invested in it. I was like, this all makes very sense with this plot. So I enjoyed it a ton. It is labeled as horror. I don't know. It's got that gothic-y feel, with the Crimson Peak kind of vibes, where it's this really kind of old house, and this very kind of things are in it that are not really quite what they seem. Maybe Haunting of Hill House. I don't know. I've seen neither of them. I can read scary things, can't watch them. But I did really enjoy this one. It's a quick and fast read, and I think will keep you guessing. I didn't know where the plot was going. Didn't know at all, but I was really interested in it. Another horror one is The Southern's Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendricks. It's no secret where I read this because of the word vampires. We all know my affinity of love with the word vampires. So this book takes place in the early 90s in Charleston, and it's kind of a picturesque, neighborhood. All the wives, take care of their kids, all the husbands work, and they're just kind of growing bored. So they decide to start a book club. And then a newcomer comes in this community, a guy, and everyone just accepts him immediately except for our main character, Patricia. She's like, something's kind of odd about him. I think he might be a vampire. That's not spoiling. I think you can put two and two together. And basically, kids start going missing, things like that. This guy's getting accepted, and she's like, why are we accepting him? Things are really kind of odd. And it kind of goes over there. And it really kind of shows a lot of how people don't take women seriously, especially in the early 90s. You were just supposed to cook and clean and provide for your family, and that's all you were supposed to do. That's all you had to, that's all that you were meant to be. So the fact that these women are noticing that there's a actual monster in their midst, nobody believes them because they're just women. So it's got a lot of deep parallels underneath it, but This is a true vampire book. By that I mean there's no torture and tragic soul, you know, begging to be loved like, you know, typical vampires that I love. This one is a really conniving vampire that will sneak his way into your life and just nestle himself right in there and be accepted. So I really enjoyed this one. The middle does get kind of slow, but the ending I thought was really good, and overall I really enjoyed it. And the last horror one I want to talk about is kind of cheating because I haven't finished yet, but I am really enjoying it, and that is Kill Creek by Scott Thomas. I'm reading this really slow because I'm very scared already. Like, this is really putting me to a test as my scaredy catness grows. Like, if you would have asked me to read this many years ago, I would have laughed right in your face. But here we are, growing and just getting more scared. So this is about this group of writers, horror writers as it is, and they get invited to like the world's famous most haunted house for a couple days, like for interviews to help kind of, you know, boost their career, boost their books and things like that. So they go there, and of course things are not quite what they seem. The house may actually be haunted. Scary things ensure. So like I said, I just started it, but I am really enjoying it, and I hope this will make the list. But either way, I did want to put this on there that like it scared me, so just, you know, take that into consideration, I guess, if you're scared like me. Next up, we have Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. This is hands down my favorite Riley Sager book. He's written, I want to say 4 now, and I really loved Final Girls. That has always been my favorite, but this one took its place immediately. It got a 5 out of 5. I never expected to give Riley Sager a 5 out of 5 because I always find myself enjoying his books but not loving them. I fell in love with Home Before Dark. So this book has kind of like 2 stories in it. So we have a character named Maggie who's kind of an interior designer. She kind of flips houses and things like that, and her dad actually gives her this house when he passes away, and the house that he gives her is one that she grew up in when she was young. Like, she spent 2 weeks into this really old house that her parents bought. It was called Banbury Hall, and a lot of really bad things happened there. Like, her dad says that it was haunted, and so they spent 2 weeks there, and then they ran out in the middle of the night and never returned. And since then, her dad had actually wrote a book about their 2 weeks at Banbury Hall. What is it called? Called House of Horrors, and it got really popular. It exploded. Everyone read it. It was on bestseller lists, but Maggie's never believed that the house was truly haunted. So when her father dies and he gives her the residence, she is finally able to go to this place to figure out if it really is haunted. What happened in this house so long ago when she was like 5 or 6 that she can't even remember, but her parents have always told her to stay away from. So in this book, we get snippets of the actual book that her dad wrote called House of Horrors. So every chapter you get like a little bit of a chapter with her dad's book, which I really enjoyed. I think added a really amazing element to it. Again, the plot twists were great. I think you could see a couple of them, but there was some that I just really loved. And overall, he really captured the kind of dark, spooky, haunted house. Or is it a haunted house? What's really going on? What happened? Why did her dad write this book? And things like that. I loved it. I've heard rave reviews about it, and I will stand behind it because it was just such an intriguing book, hands down. Next up, we have The Sundown Motel by Simone St. James. So this takes place during 2 time periods. We have 1982 and 2017. So basically in 1982, we have a character named Viv who wants to move to New York, and she wants like to make it big. But then she gets a job as the night clerk at this place called the Sundown Motel in Fell, New York. But something isn't right at the motel. She's noticing it, and then she just goes missing. Nobody ever hears from her again. Flash forward 2017, we have a character named Carly who's never been able to let go of the story of her Aunt Viv. So when her mother passes away, she decides to take this opportunity to actually go to Fell, New York and try to figure out what happened to her aunt. Like, why did she disappear? Why did no one talk about her? And things like that. And she also begins to work at the same motel that her Aunt Viv worked at all those years ago. And she starts noticing that the motel is very odd. Something is really not right with it. And I really enjoyed it. A creepy motel with mysterious guests, maybe murders happening. I loved it. It was a great Simone St. James read. I still need to read her first book, The Broken Girls, and I rest assured I will because I really enjoyed this one. Next up, I have another one of my all-time favorite thrillers, The Guest List by Lucy Foley. I read this year, and I didn't think I was going to love it. I was like, oh, it's going to be a short, sweet mystery book. But what really made me fall in love with it was the ending. I didn't see it coming from a mile away, and I just thought it wrapped it up so perfectly. So this book is about this wedding that's happening on this really remote island at this manor, and it's the wedding of, he's like a wilderness guy. Like, imagine Bear Grylls getting married to like a fashionista blogger type of person. And so it's like kind of a big wedding. So they have a whole bunch of guests coming in. We follow a slew of people. And all you know at the beginning of this book is that somebody's died and you don't know who's done it. You know, your classic whodunit. So you have to really dissect each of the characters and their histories, and the chapters go on and you figure out more. And I really enjoyed it. A lot of these characters are really unlikable, which I find a common theme with thriller books. Why? I don't know, but the way that Lucy Foley wrapped it up at the end, I really enjoyed it. It's a perfect book to read in the rain. Hence, it's even got rain on the cover of it. You're going to want to try to figure out who died, who killed them, and etc. And I really loved it. It's a short and sweet one that you'll fly through, and I don't think you'll see the ending coming. I don't think I've heard of anybody like predicting the ending. If they did, wow, good on them, because I didn't at all. Next up, I have The Night Swim by Megan Golden. So this combines some of my favorite things in thriller books. Podcast, like a thriller podcast, and a book. I guess that's only combining one thing. But either way, whenever I hear about a thriller book that has a podcast element into it, I'm immediately drawn to, because I just find them go hand in hand so amazingly together. Like, they just fit so perfectly. So this book, like I said, it's about a podcast. We have a girl named Rachel who has this podcast. I forget what her podcast is called, but this season she's actually following an ongoing trial in this really small town where a girl has said that this guy has committed rape on her, and he's up for trial, and he's like the town's golden boy. He's gonna go, you know, far in college and stuff like that. The whole town's kind of divided on whether or not this rape happened and whether or not he should be punished for it. And so Rachel goes to this town to just sit in each of the trial and talk about it on her podcast. Meanwhile, we have that going on. Rachel gets notes every now and then. This girl that says that her sister Jenny died 25 years ago in this very town. Her death was ruled as a drowning, but her sister knows that she was murdered, and she wants Rachel to help her get to the bottom of it. So Rachel is taking upon herself to not only do this trial for her podcast, but also to figure out what happened to this girl Jenny Sills 25 years ago, why her death was ruled as a drowning, and why no one really took interest into it. So you kind of have two mysteries going on at once. And this obviously talks a lot about rape culture, which is hard to read, but very important to read. The twist plots and stuff like that, I really enjoyed, didn't expect them. And I just love the way she weaved the thriller podcast element into this book, and I really enjoyed it. Like, I wouldn't even mind a sequel to this book, and I don't say that a lot with thrillers. And the last book I want to recommend is The Shadows by Alex North. So I read this year, and I was proud of myself for reading it, because I still have not read The Whisper Man by him, because I don't know why, that one just scares me a ton, probably with children and stuff like that. But The Shadows is equally as creepy. So in this book, we have two timelines as well. We have this murder that happened like years ago with this guy named Charlie Crabtree, and he was a very kind of dark and different type of boy in school. And basically, 25 years ago, he committed a murder so shocking that it's attracted a strange kind of infamy that only exists on the darkest corner of the internet. So yeah, there's copycat killings and things like that that pop up all the time. So Paul Adams remembers this because the murder happened to Paul's friends, and he moved out of town. Immediately after it happened, he's like, I gotta get out of here. But now, years later, as his mother is suffering from dementia, he comes back to help her, and he starts to realize about these copycat murders, and he's, you know, tries to figure out why and things like that. And it kind of goes on from there. It's creepy. It kind of weaves paranormal into mystery, but there was a lot of plot twist. And the more I think about it, I think I was harsher on this book, because I do still think of this a lot because of just how creepy he wrote it, like woods and forest and creepy stuff. I think we all know as thrillers, the main like goal is to stay out of the forest, and yet here we are in another forest. But it was really creepy, perfect to read for Halloween, as all of these are. So there you have it. Those are some of my favorite thrillers at the moment that I've read. As always, this list grows every single year, and I'm very happy about that. I would love to hear what some of your favorite thrillers are. Did I mention some of them? Have I not read them? Probably not. Leave them in the comments below. And yeah, I would love to hear them. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.